A young boy taken in by a guardian who treats him like family begins his journey under the man's strict sword training. With time, discipline, and determination, the boy grows stronger until he eventually becomes a legendary demon hunter, wielding a sword feared by all who dwell in darkness. On a freezing night, Suzu gets dragged across the dirt and shoved into a shed by her bastard of a father, who can't even hide how much he hates looking at her. He says straight up he wishes she was never born, then locks the door and leaves her to freeze alone till morning like it's nothing. Not long after, her brother Jinta slips outside and runs to let her out. But when he opens the shed, he freezes because she's gone. Panic hits instantly, so he tears through the village in the dark, calling her name, looking everywhere like a man possessed, until he finally spots her crossing the old bridge at the edge of town. He runs to her breath-ragged and tells her how sorry he is. Sorry for not standing up to their father. Sorry for being too weak to protect her, knowing full well that any attempt to protect her would only land him in trouble. Suzu was born with a demon eye in feudal Japan, has long been branded a cursed child, and treated as nothing more than a worthless pest. Aware that her fate is sealed with such an affliction, she tells Jinta to just go home without her. After a long, heavy moment of silence, Jinta, overwhelmed by love for his sister, declares that he cherishes her more than the rest of their family, so he takes her hand and pleads with her to run away with him. They take off together with no clue where they're headed, just putting the village behind them. Rain pours harder and the cold bites deep into their skin. Eventually, Jinta finds an old ruined building and they crawl inside, soaking wet and shaking, so they huddle close for warmth. Suzu passes out first, and just as Jinta's about to do the same, he notices a man approaching and hears him say something about taking them in. Next thing Jinta knows, he's waking up on the man's back, still half asleep. Suzu walks silently beside him, holding the man's hand. Relieved to see Jinta awake, the man sets him down, and they continue until they reach his village called Kadono, a community largely composed of blacksmiths renowned for forging katanas, all hard at work. The man then escorts Jinta and Suzu to his home, and as soon as the door swings open, his daughter darts out to greet him. Excited yet curious about the two children trailing behind, the man tells her that Jinta and Suzu will now be living with them. He asks his daughter if she's okay with this, and she lights up at the prospect, thrilled to have new friends to play with. She eagerly approaches Jinta and introduces herself as Shirayuki, hoping the three of them will get along splendidly from now on. That night, Jinta can't fall asleep, so Motoharu asks if something's bothering him. He's sitting nearby, cleaning his sword, so Jinta ends up asking if he's a samurai, but Motoharu says he's not. He tells Jinta he's actually a sentinel, and his job is to protect the people and places that matter most. Later, Jinta and Suzu head out to the river where they meet up with Shirayuki and Chitose. On the way back, Jinta brings up Yokkei's, Shirayuki's mother, who helped him and Suzu stay in the village. Shirayuki explains that Yokkei's isn't just her mom, she's the shrine maiden of Itsukiheim, chosen by a fire supreme being, and no one's allowed to see her except the village chief and her sentinel, who also happens to be her husband Motoharu. The next morning, Jinta trains with Motoharu, but since he's still a rookie with a sword, he keeps getting knocked to the ground without even landing a hit. Motoharu doesn't go easy on him either, but tells him that if he keeps training, he'll get there eventually. Years go by and Jinta ends up becoming the new sentinel for the Shrine Maiden. Now he's sitting in a meeting with the village officials and the maiden herself. She stays hidden behind a curtain as usual, and once the meeting begins, she starts by praising Jinta for how well he's handled recent demon threats. Jinta keeps it humble and says he's just doing his job. The last demon he fought had taken on human form and tried to sneak into the village. One of the officials starts looking uneasy after hearing that, and the others ask Jinta if he knows why a demon would try to do something like that. Someone suggests that the demon might have been after the Shrine Maiden, since there's a legend that says if a demon eats a maiden's liver, it becomes immortal. But it could also be after the Yurei sword. That blade's been passed down through Shrine Maidens for generations, and it's a major artifact, so it would make sense that demons would target it too. One of them adds that the Yurei was forged by one of the most skilled blacksmiths in recorded history, and it's rumored to have mystical powers sealed inside. If demons are truly after it, then things could get real bad for the village, so the chief tells everyone to stay alert. But Kiromasa doesn't seem worried at all. He says there's nothing to be afraid of since both he and Jinta are guarding the maiden, but then he throws a jab and says he doesn't think Jinta's cut out for the job. That's enough to set Jinta off, and the two of them look like they're about to argue, but before it goes too far, the chief steps in along with the maiden and tells them both to shut it. The meeting wraps up and everyone starts leaving the shrine. Everyone except Jinta, since it's his job to stay and protect the Shrine Maiden. Once they're alone, the Shrine Maiden finally steps out of her room, and it turns out to be Shirayuki. Jinta immediately questions her, asking what the hell she's doing showing herself like that. she's supposed to keep hidden, but Shirayuki brushes it off because she and Jinta have known each other forever, and she doesn't see the point in pretending to be formal around him. She casually mentions that Suzu's here too, which catches Jinta off guard. The shrine is supposed to be off-limits to outsiders, especially regular villagers like Suzu, so technically she's not supposed to be here at all. When they find Suzu asleep nearby, she looks exactly the same as she did years ago, like time hasn't touched her. She jumps up the moment she sees Jinta and lights up, happy to finally see her big brother again. He's been so busy hunting demons that she barely ever gets to spend time with him anymore. But even though Jinta's happy to see her too, he doesn't hold back and scolds her for sneaking into the shrine. She tries to argue, saying it's not fair that Jinta can see Shirayuki whenever he wants, but she can't. Still, rules are rules, and Jinta tells her flat out to go back home. After Suzu leaves, the village chief shows up again, saying he needs to talk to Shirayuki about something important. He asks Jinta to give them some space, but Jinta refuses at first. He's her sentinel, and he's supposed to stay close no matter what. But Shirayuki steps in and tells him to take the rest of the day off. After a short pause, he gives in and heads out. Meanwhile, beyond the village walls, two demons are tracking Suzu. Her demon eye caught their attention, and they've made her their next target. Later that evening, Shirayuki sneaks out of the shrine and meets up with Jinta because there's something serious she needs to get off her chest. Earlier, during her talk with the chief, he told her that she needs to start preparing to produce an heir, just in case something happens to her. With the recent demon attacks, it's not that far-fetched. If she dies, someone has to take her place. So the decision was made, and she's going to marry Kiyomasa. He's the chief's son, and he's expected to take over the village one day anyway. Jinta finds himself conflicted by the news, and Shirayuki too is far from pleased. In a moment of vulnerable honesty, she confesses that she is in love with Jinta and had even planned to ask him to run away together to start a new life. However, she knows he would never agree because Jinta had sworn an oath to protect this village, dedicating years of rigorous training to become strong enough to defend it. Shirayuki too took a solemn vow when she became the Shrine Maiden, so running away now would be nothing short of an insult to everything they have both sacrificed and built. More time passes and Jinta finds himself called into another meeting. This time is to report a demon sighting in the forest. Without hesitation, he's assigned to take it down, and he gets ready to head out immediately. But just before he can leave, Kiyomasa steps in and blocks his path. He brings up the obvious. Surely Jinta's heard by now that Shirayuki's going to marry him, so he doesn't get why the damn Jinta's acting like it doesn't bother him. Jinta keeps a straight face and tells him there's nothing to be upset about because all that matters to him is keeping the village safe and protecting the Shrine Maiden. And that's it. The crazy part is that Kiyomasa isn't even trying to gloat because he knows exactly how this looks. He knows Jinta and Shirayuki love each other, and even if he's the one marrying her, none of it feels right. It just feels messed up. But Jinta doesn't flinch because he's already made his choice, and without another word, he turns and leaves the village to handle his mission. Deep in the forest, it doesn't take long before the demon shows itself. It's a massive brute, and it comes at him fast. But before things kick off, Jinta asks if it's working alone because the report said there were supposed to be two. The demon Duva grins and says his partner had something else to take care of back in the village. That's not good, but Jinta has no choice but to deal with this one first. He charges in and lands a brutal swing, slicing straight through one of the demon's arms. But instead of screaming in pain, Duva just backs up and laughs. He picks up the severed limb like it's nothing and tells Jinta he's impressed because not many people can land a hit like that. Meanwhile, back in the village, Suzu comes face to face with the second demon, Tumi. She freezes on the spot, absolutely terrified, but Tumi just smiles and tells her there's no need to be afraid because after all, Suzu's a demon too, just like her. Suzu immediately denies it and refuses to believe it, but Tumi can see right through her. She figures out fast that Suzu's unwavering love for Jinta must be preventing her from fully embracing her demonic nature, a notion that she finds both ironic and oppressive, as it implies Jinta has showered Suzu with so much affection that it stunts her transformation. Suzu loves Jinta more than anything, so hearing Tumi say that makes her feel calmer. She starts to relax a bit, and now that she isn't so scared anymore, Tumi makes her offer. She asks Suzu to join her, to use her power and help out. She promises she won't hurt her, and since everyone knows demons can't lie, she says Suzu can trust her. But Suzu shakes her head because she knows that even if Tumi means what she says, helping her might lead to Jinta getting hurt, and that's a risk she can't take. Tumi frowns, but she doesn't give up. Instead, she changes tactics and shows Suzu a vision. In the vision, Suzu sees Shirayuki undressing and preparing to do the wild deed in the shrine, and this shit sight makes Suzu's stomach turn. Not because of what she's doing, but because it's not Jinta doing it with her. and that's what really guts her. She turns to Tumi shaken and asks if the vision she saw was real. Tumi explains that her ability lets her see into the future, and she can project those visions into someone else's mind, which is exactly what Suzu just experienced. But if she still doesn't believe it, Tumi says she's more than willing to take her to the shrine right now so she can see the whole hot show with her own eyes. Meanwhile, out in the woods, Jinta is still locked in combat with Duga. But before they clash again, he stops and demands to know why demons attack humans, so Duga replies simply that each demon has a purpose, and his purpose is to stall Jinta. Endowed with the power of assimilation, Duga can consume other demons to acquire their abilities and even reshape his own body at will. Jinta doesn't have time to sit and chat, so he launches forward, determined to end the fight in one strike. But as soon as he moves in, Duga smashes his arm clean off. And when Jinta tries to counter by aiming for the neck, Duga bites down on the blade and shatters it in one snap. It should have been over and Jinta should have died right there. But at the last second, Jinta grabs a shard from the broken sword, and with all the strength he has left, he slams it straight into Duga's heart. In a surprising twist, Duga accepts his defeat with a grim sort of satisfaction, and he reveals that his partner Demon possesses foresight, having seen 170 years into the future. And according to her vision, the mightiest demon of all time resides here, a revelation that makes Jinta suspect she's referring to Suzu. But before he can move, Duga says he's got one last parting gift for him. Suddenly, his severed arm springs to life, grabs Jinta's head, and squeezes it tight until he blacks out. Back at the shrine, Kinomasa is already on top of Shirayuki. All he needs to do is finish the job, get her pregnant, and secure the heir. With Jinta off on his mission, it's the perfect time. Otherwise, the poor guy would have had to sit outside and listen while Shirayuki moaning from inside the shrine. And as messed up as it is, Kinomasa already feels guilty enough. But before any damn thing can happen, the curtains rip open, and Tumi appears, dragging Suzu behind her to show her exactly what the hell is going down. And that shit show makes Suzu breaks. In the meantime, Jinta wakes up in the middle of the forest. Somehow his arm is back, restored like nothing ever happened, but there's no time to question it. If Tumi really made it into the village, then Suzu could already be in danger, so he gets up and takes off running, full speed toward home. At the same time, Suzu is stuck trying to process everything she just saw. Watching Shirayuki and Jinta in love was already hard, but she swallowed it all for the sake of Jinta's happiness. She even refused to grow up, kept herself frozen in that same small body, just so she wouldn't be a burden on their relationship. But now she finds out Shirayuki is marrying someone else, so that was it. That was the last crack before everything shattered, and her mind breaks because she couldn't believe Shirayuki would throw Jinta away like that. Then with a few twisted words from Tumi, Suzu completely snaps and decides that Shirayuki has to die. Her demon power erupts like wildfire and the entire room floods with black smoke, and her body begins to change, maturing into her adult form in a matter of seconds. Kinomasa grabs the legendary sword and charges at her, but before he can even swing, Tumi steps in and knocks him out cold. Then she drags him outside, saying she has her own plans for him. And just like that, Shirayuki is left face to face with Suzu. Not long after, Jinta arrives at the shrine, relieved to find that Shirayuki is still alive. He rushes to embrace her, only for his relief to turn to horror, because a split second later, Suzu slashes off Shirayuki's head. Stunned into silence, Jinta watches as Suzu steps from the shadows, holding the severed head in her grasp like it's nothing. When he demands to know why she did it, Suzu launches into her explanation about the marriage, about the betrayal, about how it wasn't fair. But Jinta doesn't care because he already knew, and even if he didn't, it still doesn't justify killing her. So at that moment, he realizes that the Suzu he once cared for has vanished. And now with Shirayuki dead, Jinta realizes he has nothing left to care about, only vengeance. As the battle within him intensifies, a demonic arm begins to merge with the rest of Jinta's body, transforming him into something altogether different. His expression turns ice cold and his eyes are filled with nothing but hate. And when he looks at Suzu now, it's not with sadness, it's with pure disgust. She can understand why, because all she ever wanted was to make him happy, and that's all she tried to do. But the look in his eyes tells her everything. He's done with her, just like everyone else. So she decides to end it. If Jinta's going to turn his back on her, then she'll kill him too, and she drives her blade into his stomach. But nothing happens, and Jinta doesn't even flinch. So the next second, he drives his fist straight through her chest. Suzu collapses, gasping, blood pouring out of her, but she's not dead yet. So as Jinta moves in to finish her, Tumi throws herself in the way. She takes the full hit, sacrificing herself to save Suzu one last time. As she starts fading, she tells Suzu to leave and run while she still can. Suzu stumbles away, weak and broken, but alive. And just before she disappears, she turns back one final time and tells Jinta that she has nothing left, and that this world took everything from her. And no matter how long it takes, she'll be back. And when she returns, she'll burn it all to the ground, and on the final day, she'll kill him for betraying her. Hearing her vow, Tumi's eyes gleam with wild excitement because she believes that by fulfilling Suzu's promise of vengeance, she has finally accomplished her purpose. Her maniacal laughter reverberates, inciting Jinta's fury as he struggles to understand how the hell they could regard needless death as their ultimate goal. Tumi, sensing his outrage, calmly reveals that in the far future she saw, demons don't exist anymore. Humans have evolved so far that demons faded into myth. But now with someone like Suzu alive and fully awakened, the bloodline won't end, and she smiles one last time and fades away for good. Later, tragedy strikes in Kodono as a massive fire devastates the land and homes. Amid the ruins, Jinta cradles the lifeless body of the princess, consumed by guilt for failing to protect her, and he fervently confesses his love for her. The following morning, while the villagers begin rebuilding from the ashes, Jinta prepares to head out. That's when the village leader greets him warmly and learns of his plans to venture forth and defend humanity against the looming threat of a demon lord, whom some fear might even be Suzu. The old man, with sorrow in his eyes, wonders if Jinta can truly bring himself to slay his own sister. In response, Jinta bitterly declares that he has no choice but to harbor hatred for the one who murdered the woman he loved, even as he hopes for a more merciful resolution to come. But before departing, the village head presents Jinto with the revered Yurei sword, declaring that henceforth he shall be known as Jinya. Though Jinta feels unworthy of such an honor, the elder explains that the demise of the Isukim lineage left a void that only someone of Jinta's character could fill. In a moment of contrition, the old man falls to his knees and apologizes for forcing the princess into marriage with Kiyomasa, insisting that his actions were meant only to appease his son, not to benefit Kodono. Jinta, despite the bitterness in his heart, accepts the apology and helps the man up, then sets off on his journey with the hope of one day saving the people from the coming calamity. As he departs, the chief vows to erect a shrine in his honor and name it Jinta Shrine, so that if he ever returns, the village will remember the hero he once was. But before he leaves, Chitose rushes up to him, tearfully reminding him that she still sees him as the caring big brother he used to be. Gently, Jinta reassures her that he will return someday. With the village fading into the distance behind him, Jinta reflects on the demon's unsettling contentment in fulfilling its grim purpose. Steeling himself for the long and arduous journey ahead, he marches onward. After many years of travel, he finally arrives at a remote temple, where he meets a young girl whom he believes to be the temple's Meko. By the 1850s, Jinta, who is now going by Jinya, had made a serious name for himself as a demon slayer. One day, he gets called in by some rich guy for what sounds like a pretty important gig. The man introduces Jinya to his assistant Zenji, and tells him that if he needs any more info, Zenji's the guy to ask. After that, the man steps out, leaving the two of them alone. Zenji then greets Jinya politely and asks how much he's been told already. Jinya says the man already gave him the rundown about his precious daughter Natsu, and how he's worried about some demon that's been lurking around lately. But apparently, there's a bit more to it. Jinya's actual role is going to be serving as Natsu's personal guard, because ever since she hit 13, she's been hearing some creepy voice outside her room at night. The demon keeps saying creepy stuff like, "Return my daughter to me," and now she's terrified it's going to snatch her. But before Zenji could go into more detail, the door burst open and Natsu stormed in, clearly upset and looking for Zenji. Her eyes immediately lock onto Jinya, and she assumes this must be the bodyguard her father mentioned. But when Jinya tries to introduce himself, she shuts him down fast. She wants nothing to do with him and tells him to get lost, accusing him of being some sketchy wannabe demon hunter just trying to scam her family. Zenji tries to calm her down and explains that her father searched high and low for someone legit and that Jinya is the real deal, but Natsu isn't having any of it. She demands that Zenji throw him out. That night, Natsu's still wide awake, too anxious to sleep. She's convinced the demon is coming back, so Zenji decides to keep watch outside her room to help her feel safe. Jinya would have been the smarter choice for this, but since she basically kicked him out, Zenji's stuck taking his place. He's not exactly confident he'd be any good in a demon fight, but he promises to stay right there until morning if it helps her sleep better. Natsu really appreciates him being there, but she's still disappointed. Even Zenji seems like he doesn't totally believe her story. Her dad didn't believe her either, because why else would he hire some random wandering samurai instead of someone trusted? Zenji admits he doesn't know if her father truly believes in demons, but what he can say for sure is that the man genuinely cares about her. He wants her safe, even if they don't share blood. Right then, Natsu hears that same creepy voice again, and that damn voice makes her almost piss herself. She panics and pleads with Zenji to do something, but the second he lays eyes on the demon, he's just as shaken as she is. He tells Natsu to stay locked in her room while he tries to handle the situation himself, except he has absolutely no clue how the hell he's supposed to fight something like this. The demon then moves closer, so Zenji braces for the worst, but right before its claws reach him, the damn thing's arm flies off clean in a flash. Jinya then steps out of the shadows, calmly asking the demon to identify itself. But when it doesn't respond, he doesn't wait around. With one smooth, heavy strike, he cuts it clean in two. The demon collapses and vanishes into black smoke, which means for now, Natsu and Zenji are safe. Natsu instantly recognizes Jinya as the guy she threw out earlier, and he turns to her, asking if she still thinks he's some kind of con artist. She stares at the fading smoke and asks if the demon is really gone, but Jinya tells her it's not that simple. In his experience, demons don't stay dead unless they fade into white mist, so the fact that this one turned black, it's definitely coming back. The next day, Zenji formally thanks Jinya for saving them. And since they both know the demon's not done yet, Zenji asks him to stay another night. Jinya agrees without hesitation, but he has a few questions, specifically about Natsu. Ever since he heard that thing whisper "return my daughter to me," he's been wondering if there's something deeper going on. Zenji nods and starts explaining. Natsu's biological parents were distant relatives of the boss, but they passed away some years back. The boss took her in and raised her like she was his own. And if Jinya's worried she might be some sort of demon child, Zenji is quick to shut that idea down. If she were, there's no way the boss would have taken her in. His hatred for demons runs deep because his wife was killed by one, and after that, his son disappeared and was never seen again. The man's lost everything to demons, and he despises them with every part of his soul. That evening during dinner, Natsu sits across from her father. He asks how things are going with her new bodyguard. She admits that she had her doubts about Jinya at first, but after what she saw last night, she's convinced that he's legit. Still, she wants to know why her father chose him of all people. He leans back and explains that lately, there have been more demon sightings around Edo Town. And not just that, there's also been talk of a wandering swordsman who can kill any demon with a single blow as long as he gets paid. Her father checked into it himself, and the rumors were true. That swordsman is Jinya, and he knew no one else would be better suited to protect his daughter. Natsu feels relieved knowing her father actually believed her about the demon because his trust means more to her than anything. And ever since he took her in, she's been genuinely happy. But even with that, it hasn't been easy. She's constantly had to deal with the cruel things people say about her behind her back, and it's worn her down. Later that evening as planned, Zenji and Jinya are sitting near Natsu's room to keep watch. Out of nowhere, Natsu steps out and asks for Jinya's name, since she never actually let him introduce himself properly before. Now that she sees how much her father trusts him, she's decided to trust him too. Jinya notices right away how deeply Natsu cares about her adoptive father Juzo, but honestly, it makes sense. He gave her a home where she had nowhere else to go, so of course she's grateful. While they're on the subject, Jinya brings up something he's been wondering about. He asks her if she knows anything about the rumors surrounding Juzo's missing son. But the moment he says it, Natsu snaps and says she doesn't know anything, her voice sharp and defensive. Clearly, it's not something she's ready to talk about, so Jinya doesn't push it. He backs off, deciding it's not worth upsetting her right now. But then Natsu asks if it's even possible for a demon and a human to have a child, and Jinya tells her it is. That answer seems to shake her a bit, and she starts wondering out loud if maybe she is the daughter of that demon that's been stalking her. But Jinya shuts that idea down immediately. He tells her there's no way she's related to that thing. She asks him how he can be so sure, and Jinya explains that he's crossed paths with this demon before, so he knows what it is. And he knows it's not her mother. He then explains that demons can be born in a few different ways. Some come from two demons, others from a demon and a human. But in rarer cases, a demon doesn't need parents at all. Sometimes demons just appear. When heavy emotions, usually anger, grief, or hate, build up inside people and fester long enough, they can take shape and manifest into creatures like the one that's been haunting her. Right then, the demon shows up again and Natsu starts to panic. But Jinya calmly walks toward the thing and tries talking to it, asking for its name. But it's clearly not the type that can think, let alone speak. As it lunges at him, Jinya smacks it clean across the face and pins it straight into the ground like it's nothing. Zenji shouts to Jinya to just finish the damn thing already, but Jinya shakes his head and says there's no point, it'll just come back. Natsu, completely confused, asks why. So Jinya explains that this thing wasn't summoned or sent, it was born, and its birth came from her emotions. It manifested because deep down Natsu believed that if something terrifying happened, like a demon attack, it would make her father pay more attention to her. At first Natsu denies it, She doesn't want to believe she's responsible for all this. But as she thinks about it, every word Jinya says starts hitting too close to home. All she ever really wanted was to be seen as Juzu's real daughter. She thought if she was in danger, if she was vulnerable enough, maybe finally he'd treat her like family. And somehow, out of those feelings, this monster appeared. Jinya tells her that the only real way to get rid of the demon is to get a grip on her feelings, to face them instead of hiding behind them. Natsu says she doesn't even know how to begin doing that, so Jinya tells her it's not that complicated. She just needs to be honest and accept how she feels, then look him in the eye and ask him to end it. Natsu takes a moment, and in that silence, everything becomes clear. She just wanted to be loved by Juzu, like she mattered to him for real. But somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that he didn't and he will never would. So she started believing that if she were in danger, maybe he'd finally see her. And now that twisted, desperate part of her is standing right in front of her in the shape of this thing. So in some way, this demon is her. But Zenji steps in before she gets lost in that guilt. He tells her not to let that thought get to her. Sure, the demon came from her pain, but what matters now is moving past it. He reminds her that Juzu does love her, more than she knows. And she loves him back just as much, but neither of them has ever been good at showing it. Zenji promises to help her work through that from now on. And hearing that finally gives her the strength to let go of the feelings that created the demon in the first place. Then with a deep breath, Natsu tells Jinya to end it. And without hesitation, Jinya draws his blade and slices the creature clean in two. This time, it fades into a soft white mist, and that's the sign Jinya was waiting for, and the demon won't be coming back. Or so it seems, because later that night, once Natsu is sound asleep, something unexpected happens. The demon's form starts to reappear. Jinya, who stayed up just in case, isn't surprised because he suspected this might happen. If the demon had been made purely from Natsu's emotions, then it should have vanished the second she let go, but it didn't. Which means someone else's pain must have been part of it too. And in this house, in this region, the only other person who ever came close to becoming a demon was Juzu's late wife. Then with Natsu's feelings no longer fueling it, the demon starts to fall apart, and it's struggling to keep its form together. But as it cries out for its daughter again, it doesn't call for Natsu, it calls for Suzu. That's when everything clicks. Jinya isn't just some wandering swordsman, he's Juzu's long-lost son. And this demon is Suzu and Jinya's mother. The thing is, Jinya doesn't really remember much about his mother from when she was alive. But even so, seeing what she became hurts him, so the only thing he can do now is set her free, to give her the peace she was never able to find on her own. The next morning, Jinya gets ready to leave. As he's heading out, Zenji and Natsu come to see him off and thank him one more time. But Jinya just waves it off, saying he's already been paid, and truth be told, this was something he needed to do anyway. Natsu tilts her head confused, so Jinya explains that with age comes perspective. Looking back now, he can see things more clearly than he ever could back then. He always thought taking Suzu and running away was the right thing to do. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but he never stopped to think how that choice might have affected the people he left behind, or the world they were part of. Natsu still doesn't really get it, so Jinya just smiles and tells her to never take her father's kindness for granted. He then turns around and walks off, and a short moment later, Juzu steps outside. Zenji asks why he didn't come out sooner to say goodbye, but Juzu shrugs. He didn't need to because he already knew Jinya would handle everything. Zenji asks how he could be so sure, why put so much faith in a guy he barely knows, but Juzu simply says that it's only natural for a father to believe in his son. They still haven't figured out that Jinya is his son, and he doesn't plan to explain anything to them. Then he tells Zenji to quit standing around and get back to work before he ends up demoted. Not wanting to push his luck, Zenji hurries off to his duties, leaving Juzu standing there alone. Right before he turns to leave, Natsu calls out to him. She asks if there's anything she can do to help around the estate. He raises an eyebrow and asks why she's suddenly offering. She says Jinya told her she should try to repay her father's kindness, and that gets a rare smile out of Juzu. It means a lot to him to know that Jinya still sees him as someone worth respecting. But he gently tells her that she doesn't owe him anything. Because the best thing a child can ever do for a parent is live a good, happy life. He then goes inside, leaving Natsu so happy by his words, but she still wants to help around, so she goes after him. The story then jumps forward to the year 1853, where we find Jinya calmly waiting for his soba at a quiet little noodle shop. The owner's daughter brings over his bowl with careful hands, and her father smiles, clearly proud that she's finally getting the hang of serving customers. The shop owner strikes up a conversation, mentioning that there's been disturbing talk lately, rumors about a serial killer haunting the streets. With a worried glance at his daughter, he admits it's starting to make him nervous. He sighs and says he wishes the emperor would just pull himself together already, but Jinya quickly tells him to watch his mouth. The owner agrees, laughing awkwardly. Last thing he wants is for his shop to be burned down barely 10 days after opening. He admits he actually got this place for cheap after buying it from the previous owner, but now he's wondering why Jinya has been showing up for soba 5 days in a row, considering how empty the place always is. His daughter warns him that he's probably going to scare off the one customer they do have, but the owner waves it off, saying they're just making small talk. Then he turns to Jinya and asks how the soba tastes. Jinya gives it a straight answer. It's not bad, just plain. The owner chuckles and admits that he doesn't have much talent for cooking. He only makes soba because he loves it. Jinya can't help but ask why he even opened a shop, and the man simply says he had his reasons. After finishing his meal, Jinya pays the bill, and the owner casually notes that he seems to be doing all right financially for a Ronin. Jinya shrugs and says he earns his money by slaying demons. The owner laughs, thinking Jinya is joking, but Jinya just heads for the door without another word. Before he can leave, the owner stops him and brings up something strange. According to the rumors, this so-called slasher doesn't use a sword. Every body I've found so far has been torn to shreds, completely mangled. What's worse is the numbers don't line up. More people have gone missing than bodies recovered, so folks are starting to believe it's not a human doing this. They're saying it has to be demons. Jinya asks where these incidents usually happen, and the owner tells him the sightings have been around the Edobashi area. As Jinya steps out, the daughter calls out to him, asking him to be careful, but he simply replies that he's not a kid. That night, Jinya positions himself by a bridge, waiting in the shadows for the demon to show up. Hours go by, but there's no sign of anything unusual. Just as he's about to leave, a woman's scream echoes through the night, and without hesitation, Jinya bolts toward the sound. When Jinya arrives at the scene, he finds several mangled corpses sprawled across the ground, but no sign of the demon. He glances around, confused because he definitely heard a woman scream, but there's not a single woman in sight. As he begins scanning the area more closely, something invisible lashes out at him, but Jinya barely dodges in time. The invisible demon strikes again, and this time, Jinya manages to block the blow. But before he can retaliate, the demon vanishes and reappears behind him, landing a hit that cuts him. Annoyed now, Jinya morphs his arm into its transformed state, relieved that no one's around to witness this. The demon charges once more, but this time Jinya counters, shattering its blade in the process. The creature tries to escape, but Jinya lands a deep slash before it can flee and calls it the Slasher. Hearing the name, the demon suddenly stops and becomes visible, revealing himself. Jinya narrows his eyes and demands a name, warning that if he doesn't get one, the next swing will be fatal. The demon finally introduces himself as Mosuk, so Jinya doesn't hesitate and moves in to finish him off, but Mosuk throws up his hands and says he doesn't want to fight. Jinya halts, confused because if he didn't want to fight, then why attack? Mosuk explains that he thought Jinya was the serial killer. He'd heard the same rumors about a demon behind the murders, so he followed a strong demonic scent and ran into Jinya. The moment Jinya called him the Slasher, he realized he made a mistake. Still confused, Jinya asks why a demon would be hunting down a killer in the first place. Mosuk replies that this isn't the place for a chat because someone might spot them here, so they should talk somewhere private. Cut to the two of them sitting inside Mosuk's home, where the demon now looks entirely human. Mosuk then explains that as demons get older, many choose to live quiet lives by blending into society. They don't exactly lie, but they do hide the truth, and Jinya knows that much already. Mosuk then pours them both some cheap liquor and assures Jinya it's not poisoned, but Jinya says that it wouldn't matter because poison wouldn't kill him anyway. As they drink, Mosuk explains that he's just a regular villager, scraping by in a dingy back alley house, but Jinya knows better. Mosuk is a demon, a rare kind capable of completely erasing his presence from the world, and Mosuk explains that his ability is called invisibility. He's one of the superior demons, the kind that's lived for over a century. Jinya's surprised because he expected someone that old to be a lot stronger. But Mosuk chuckles and explains that the title superior refers to their awakened abilities, not their raw strength. In fact, some superior demons like him are physically weaker and slower than even the average demon. Jinya gets the sense that Mosuk really isn't the killer, and Mosuk knows Jinya isn't either. Jinya decides to believe him, but something still doesn't sit right. If Mosuk thought he was the Slasher, why did he go straight for the kill instead of confirming it first? Mosuk admits it was personal and asks Jinya if he's heard the rumors about the disappearances. Jinya says that he has, and he even confirmed it himself earlier when he heard a woman scream, but found no trace of her body. That's when Mosuk tells him the truth. The Slasher only kills men on the spot, but women are abducted. Jinya asks how he can be so sure, so Mosuk clenches his fist and tells him that the demon took his wife. Her name was Hatsu, and she was a kind-hearted human, and she accepted him even though he was a demon. A month ago, she vanished without a trace. 10 days later, her body washed up by the Kanda River. The officer he spoke to said she'd been horribly violated before she died. Mosuke's voice shakes as he talks. Hatsu was a bright light, sweet, sociable, and the only one who ever looked at him with genuine love, and she didn't deserve what happened to her. Mosuke admits he's never cared much for humans, but he loved her with everything he had. Now, all he feels is rage, pure hatred for the thing that took her from him in such a vile, unforgivable way, and he swears that he'll get revenge, so he asks Jinya to step aside to leave the killer to him. But Jinya refuses, so Mosuke asks why, and Jinya simply tells him that it's his job to slay demons. Mosuke gets it, so in that case, they'll do this together. But when they find the slasher, he wants to be the one to finish it. That's when Jinya stops him and asks if revenge is really what he's chasing. Mosuke stares at him for a second, then asks if he doubts him. Jinya says no, it's not about doubt. But no matter who's behind this, human or demon, someone's life is going to be taken. So you need to be sure you're ready to carry that weight. Mosuke tells him demons don't lie, not even to ourselves. And that goes for how we feel too. And with that, Jinya agrees that they'll handle this together. The next night, we see the two of them scouring the city, gathering information about the slasher. They question everyone they can, but come up with nothing. It's frustrating, and they're not exactly thrilled about their lack of progress, but they know they'll have to keep pushing. Later on, the two of them are back at Mosuke's place sharing some sake, and Mosuke decides to ask Jinya a question that's been on his mind. Why does he hunt his own kind? Jinya says it's mostly for the money, and there's no shortage of humans who hate demons, and they're willing to pay a pretty sum to see them wiped out. Mosuke figures there's more to it than that though, because he doesn't see Jinya as the kind of guy who kills without reason, so he presses him about the real reason. Jinya leans back and says it's also about power because he's on a mission to stop a certain demon, and that surprises Mosuke because Jinya did say that he wants to stop it, not kill it. Jinya then tells him that he was born human, but after he watched a demon murder the woman he loved, something in him broke and he turned into what he is now. That's why killing demons who threaten humans feels so natural to him. Mosuke is stunned because even after all that shit, Jinya still wants to spare the one who destroyed his life. Jinya says he won't know what to do until the day he finally faces that demon. Until then, he needs strength first. Mosuke admits it's a lot to unpack, but Jinya just says that he's being spineless. Then Jinya turns the question around. Once Mosuke gets his revenge, what's he planning to do? Mosuke goes quiet for a second, then says he never wanted any of this, and the only reason he tried living like a human was because he hates violence, and he never wanted to be hunted by humans. Also, he never wanted to fight other demons either because all he really wanted was a quiet life with the woman he loved. He says once this is over, he's going back into hiding. He'll tend to Hatsu's grave, and that will be the end of it. Jinya then remembers something Mosuke said earlier about him, that he's not the kind of person who does things without a good reason. That's not true because he is carrying a mindless hatred for his sister. The next day, we see Jinya back at the usual soba shop, quietly eating his lunch. The owner's daughter walks over and casually asks if he's had any luck tracking down the slasher, but he tells her that things aren't going so well. The owner then rumbles that making a living is damn near impossible these days. Jinya agrees, then nods toward the girl and says that with a cute waitress like Ofu, they should be packed by now. But maybe people in Edo were just too busy to notice, so the owner smiled, glad someone thought his daughter was beautiful. Jinya says with confidence that 8 out of 10 people would probably agree with him, and the owner grins, telling him he's got good taste. But Ofu quickly steps in and tells her father not to get ahead of himself. He reminds her loudly that she's never even had a relationship before, saying maybe this is a good chance for her. Embarrassed, Ofu cuts him off, asking him not to put Jinya on the spot. She tells him not to worry because she'll leave the nest when the time is right. But for now, she just wants a little more time to be his daughter. Her father quiets down, understanding what she means. She then turns to Jinya with an apologetic smile and says sorry about all that, but Jinya doesn't mind one bit. In fact, he says she's lucky to have a father like that. She's proud of her old man, but it makes her wonder what Jinya's father was like. He explains that he has a younger sister, but their father never treated her right, said she didn't belong in the family and beat her for things she couldn't control. That's why Jinya took her and ran away from home, but it was a long time ago. She gently asks him if he hates his father for that, but Jinya says no, and he gets it now why his father acted the way he did. It doesn't make it right, but he understands. Later that night, Jinya is once again out patrolling with Mosuke, searching for any signs of the slasher, but the trail is cold and nothing so far. Mosuke mentions that there haven't been any new sightings recently, so there's no point in wandering around blind. Just then, he notices a figure standing by a tree, and it turns out to be Ofu. Jinya tells him she's the daughter of the soba shop he always visits, and Mosu quietly notes that it's not safe for her to be out this late, so Jinya nods and starts walking toward her. She then looks up and asks what he was doing out there by himself, but then Jinya notices that Mosu has already turned invisible again and tells him quietly to escort her just in case, because if the slasher really is still lurking, it'd be bad if she ran into it alone. Jinya then asks Ofu what she's doing out here at this hour. She smiles and says she was just out admiring the cherry blossoms, but Jinya points out these aren't cherry blossoms, they're willows. She laughs a little and gently corrects him, saying that these are called snow willows. Technically, they aren't true willows, and they're not quite cherry blossoms either. They just resemble willows in how they hang, but they belong to the same family as cherries. So basically, it's not a cherry blossom and it's not a willow. It's a little bit of both and yet neither. Jinya looks at it for a moment and says it's a pitiful kind of plant. But Ofu disagrees and she thinks it's beautiful. Even if it doesn't perfectly fit into either category, it still blooms lovely flowers every year. She doesn't know what the plant feels exactly, but if it were really sad and empty, it wouldn't keep blooming the way it does. So no, it doesn't mean it's pity because it'll keep blooming every spring, no matter what people call it, and that's just how it lives. Jinya looked at the flower again and realized she was right, that really was its way of life. He then tells her they should head back because her father's probably worried sick by now, and she nods. As they walk together toward her house, Ofu casually tells him that he really ought to take more time to unwind. He wonders if he really comes off that tense, and she says he definitely gives off broody vibes. He's always pushing himself too hard, and he admits that might be true. After all, he only lives for one thing, and that's the purpose he's meant to fulfill. She has no idea what this purpose even is, but she tells him he should ease up once in a while. Life's gotta be dull if all he does is chase after some goal nonstop. Still in his mind, that's all he's got, and he tells her flat out that he can't take her advice, not even if he wanted to. A second later, she notices some flowers along the path and stops to admire them, pointing out that they're winter daphnes. She explains that these blooms start budding in the fall and tough it out through winter, only to bloom come spring, so that bloom means spring's officially arrived. She then points to another patch, and when she tries to tell him what kind they are, he tells her that they're chickweed. He mentions that boiling chickweed stalks makes a great stomach remedy. Back in his village, it was a go-to cure, especially for a childhood friend of his who loved sweets so much that she'd always end up with stomach aches. Ofu laughs, saying that girl sounds like a fun one, and he admits he was always dancing to her rhythm. Hearing that, Ofu starts to think there's more to his story than he lets on. He enjoys soba, he stops to admire flowers, he holds on to warm memories from the past. Clearly, he's more than just someone chasing a purpose. She gently tells him that being so locked in on one goal is blinding him to the rest of the world. She asks him to slow down sometimes, take a moment to live in the now. If he does, she's sure he'll see things he's never noticed before. Not long after, they arrive at her house and notice that the lights are still on. So Jinya realizes her dad must have stayed up waiting for her. She then thanks him for walking her home, and as she turns to leave, he asks if she'll teach him more about flowers sometime, but next time preferably while the sun's still out. She smiles and agrees, then heads inside. That's when Mosu turns off his invisibility and comments that Ofu seems like a good woman. Jinya nearly jumps, completely shocked that Mosu had been tailing him the whole time. Mosu dodges the question and walks off, saying he's heading out to keep looking for the slasher. And once again, the night ends with Jinya camping out on the bridge, waiting in silence for the killer to show. A drunk guy then stumbles past Jinya, and right then, the slasher shows up out of nowhere and attacks him. The woman behind them drops to her knees in shock, and that's when Jinya finally gets a good look at the slasher for the first time. It lunges at him, but he blocks the strike, and the girl, still in disbelief, starts to panic. Jinya warns her to stay put if she wants to stay alive, then he moves the fight away from her to keep her out of harm's way. But the slasher sees an opening and tries to circle back and go after the girl. Before he can get close, Mosu jumps in and pulls her to safety while Jinya follows up with a counterattack. Realizing it's completely outmatched, the slasher decides to bail and shoots off into the air to escape. After it's gone, Jinya apologizes to Mosu for letting it slip away, but Mosu brushes it off, saying it was tougher than he thought it'd be. Still, he's going to track it to find out where it's hiding. Jinya tells him to be careful and keep his distance, and Mosu nods, assuring him he has no plans of dying anytime soon. He takes off after it, and once he's gone, the girl behind Jinya asks for a hand getting up. He helps her up and she gives him a look, saying his grumpy attitude really takes her back. She wonders if he still remembers her, and when he looks closer, he realizes it's Natsu. She's happy he still recognizes her, and he points out how much she's changed. It's been 3 years after all, and she's surprised that he hasn't aged a bit. He jokes that he's immune to aging, and she laughs it off like he's messing with her. Curious, he asks what she's doing out here this late, and she explains she was heading home after dropping off a delivery to one of the regular customers. He notes again how different she seems. Her smile looks more natural now, and she tells him that just proves she's not a kid anymore. Right then, Zenji shows up and teases her, saying she's not quite an adult yet, which clearly catches her off guard. He then spots Jinya and instantly jumps to conclusions, asking if the two of them are wrapped up in some kind of romance. Jinya quickly shuts that down, telling him Natsu just got attacked by a serial killer. Zenji then notices the body nearby and totally freaks out. He suggests they call for the authorities, but Natsu says that won't help because this was the work of a demon. Jinya confirms it, saying it's the same demon he's been chasing for a while, and Natsu just got caught in the crossfire. Sir Zenji then jokes that Jinya really has a habit of surrounding himself with demons, and Natsu turns to ask how he's making a living these days. He told her he was still working as a demon-slaying Ronin, and if she ever wanted to see him again, she could find him at a soba shop in Fukugawa called Kahai. He even offered her a discount if she stopped by. Since her escort was already here, he figured it was time to go, but before parting, she thanked him for saving her life. As Jinya was walking off, Zenji called out one last piece of advice. If Jinya was still looking for demons, he might want to check out Teramachi Temple. The place had been abandoned ever since the head priest passed away, and locals were saying they'd been hearing a woman's voice echoing from inside. Rumors were spreading that something unnatural might be living there. Meanwhile, Mosuke is still tracking the demon through the streets, but he ends up losing it. Just then, a woman's scream cuts through the night, and he rushes toward the sound, only to spot the demon carrying someone. It instantly reminds him of his wife Hatsu, and the rage she's been holding and finally explodes. He chases the demon all the way to Teramachi Temple, slips inside using his invisibility, and what he sees in there leaves him shaking with fury. The demon is devouring the woman it just kidnapped, swallowing her whole, bones and all. That's it. Mosu can't hold himself back anymore. He charges in, dead set on ending the thing, convinced it's the same one that murdered Hatsu. But the demon senses him coming and tears into him with its claws, shredding his gut open. Then it calmly goes back to its meal, chewing through the woman's head while Mosu lies on the ground, bleeding out and wondering if this is how he's going to die, pathetic and empty, without even getting his revenge. Eventually, the demon leaves, and not long after, Jinya shows up. He spots Mosu barely hanging on and kneels beside him. Mosu manages a weak grin, joking that he really made a mess of himself. Jinya asks if he found the demon, and Mosu confirms it, saying it was here, eating women alive. It's the same monster that took his wife. Jinya is stunned to hear that, especially about the eating part. Then Mosu makes one final request. He asks Jinya to avenge him and hands him a sword forged in Kodono, saying it'll slice through any demon like butter. Jinya promises to do just that, but in return, he asks Mosu to lend him his power. Mosu is relieved and grateful, even that he can still help Jinya one last time, even if it's with his dying breath. Jinya then absorbs Mosu's power, and as he does, he catches a glimpse into his soul. He sees that Mosu can spend most of his life running from demons, constantly looking over his shoulder. But when he finally settled in this town, he began living like a regular human, and for the first time, he found peace. Eventually, he met the woman who would become his wife, and over time, they fell in love. When things got serious, he came clean about his true nature, revealing that he was actually a demon. But instead of running away, she looked him dead in the eye and told him she loved him, so human or demon, it didn't matter to her. After seeing that, Jinya finishes absorbing Mosu's power and quietly promises to carry out his final wish. Some time passes, and we see the demon dragging another woman into its hideout and starts feeding. As it eats, it starts recalling the day it first became self-aware. It had already been born into this grotesque demonic body. From the beginning, it had this instinct, this need to kill men. That urge was the only thing it understood at the time. Since then, it had been searching for something. It didn't know who or what it was looking for, just that it needed to go home. But it didn't even know where home was. The only thing it was sure of was that it couldn't return in its current state, so it kept abducting women. It believed they carried something its body lacked. That's why it devoured them, so it could consume what was missing and finally find a way back. Back in the present, the demon continues its feeding frenzy when suddenly, Jinya shows up. He's surprised the creature would come back here after its lair was exposed. Without hesitation, he attacks using invisibility, slicing off one of its hands in a clean strike. The demon lashes back, but Jinya dodges every blow, keeping just out of reach. It bolts across the temple, trying to go on the offensive, and Jinya admits that its power is kind of a pain to deal with, but this time he is armed with Mosu's power. He dodges every strike again, then drops his invisibility and lets the demonic aura in his arm flare. He then tells the demon that he's going to end him by using the gift Mosu entrusted him with. Jinya then charges in, vanishing at the last second, and in one clean motion, takes its head off. The demon is still clinging to life, gasping in pain, and Jinya walks up to it, demanding an answer. He asks why it left Mosuk's wife's body untouched when it devoured every other woman it captured. If it really was the killer Mosuk was hunting, then why didn't it consume her completely? The demon starts crying, saying it needed a body. It couldn't go home without one. Jinya doesn't understand what it's talking about, but he remembers the question the demon asked him earlier if he feasts too. He tells it yes, he does. Except he feeds on demons the same way it fed on women. Now he's going to consume its power. As he absorbs the demon's strength, he realizes its ability is called Dart, a temporary speed burst that lets the user kick through the air and accelerate instantly. It's a solid ability, one he's sure will come in handy. But as he consumes the demon, he ends up seeing into its soul. He sees Hatsu, Mosuk's wife, being violated by two men while they're laughing, before tossing her into the river like trash. As she sinks, her final thoughts are about going home, but she refuses to return in a body that's been defiled. Instead, she searches for another vessel, one that can help her make it back to her husband. That's when she spots a nearby demon, and now it becomes clear to Jinya that this demon was Hatsu, and she just wanted to go home, but that was never going to happen. The demon then fades away, and Jinya quietly leaves the temple. A few days later, back at the soba shop, the owner mentions that Jinya hasn't shown up in a while. He figures it's because he joked about letting him marry his daughter. She reminds her father that he never actually said that, and she also ran into Jinya the other day in Asakusa, and they chatted for a bit. He told her he'd stop by once he was finished with his current job. The owner thinks that the job might already be done because word around town is that the slasher disappeared and the killings have stopped. But she tells him Jinya mentioned he's still got demons to hunt. Somewhere else, those same two men who violated Hatsu are wandering the streets late at night. They start talking about finding their next victim, laughing about how the last one cried out for her husband as they dragged her under. But then they see Jinya. He steps forward without a word and cuts both of them down in a single strike. Looking down at their bodies, he says nothing, just hopes that Mosu can finally rest in peace now that Hatsu's been avenged, and he walks away. The scene then shifts to a little girl singing a haunting tune, her voice giving off an eerie, ghost-like atmosphere, and she stops the moment the song ends. After that, we see a samurai approaching Ofu's soba shop, and right at the entrance, he notices someone mistaking him for his brother. As he tries to approach that person, he accidentally crashes into Natsu, who immediately panics upon realizing she just collided with a samurai, apologizing profusely. He doesn't take it personally though, and he apologizes as well, admitting that he should have been paying more attention. The owner of the shop then steps in to reassure Natsu, telling her not to worry, because this man is Natsugu Miura. He may be a samurai, but he's well known around here for being gentle and kind-hearted. The next morning, we find Natsugu sitting in the shop again, quietly staring at his soba, but the owner notices that he looks troubled. Curious, the owner asks him what's on his mind, and Natsugu admits that something has been bothering him. The owner offers to hear him up, and Natsugu confides that it's about his older brother. The owner is shocked to hear this since, as far as he knows, Natsugu is the heir to the Miura family, so there shouldn't even be an older brother. But Natsugu is completely sure he once had an older brother and asks Ofu if she's ever heard of him, revealing that his name was Sadenaga Miura. Ofu says she hasn't, and Natsugu expected as much, since nobody seems to remember his brother, not even his own damn family. He started questioning his own sanity, but the owner tries to lighten the mood. Ofu then chimes in, saying she knows someone who might be able to help, and her father adds that the guy's a regular customer too, and he has a habit of poking his nose into all kinds of strange cases. Natsugu wonders aloud if the man might be some kind of diviner or shaman, which makes Ofu and her father burst out laughing. They explain that he's nothing that fancy, just a Ronin who for some reason goes around solving bizarre incidents for a price. The owner adds that although he can come across as intimidating, he's actually very kind with some funny quirks. He drops by the shop every single day just to scarf down their soba, and right on cue, Jinya steps into the shop. Jinya places his order as usual, and as he eats, the owner jokes that he must really love their soba if he keeps coming back every day. But Jinya casually replies that it's nothing special, he's just grown attached to the taste. Ofu then comes over to pour Jinya a refill of tea, and he notices that she's gotten a lot better at waitressing. She's happy to hear the compliment and asks him what progress he's made recently. Jinya tells her all about the different flowers he's been learning about lately. He admits that plants are surprisingly fascinating, and now he can't help but notice all the flowers blooming by the roadside. Hearing that, she smiles and tells him that since they already covered all the seasonal plants, it's time for her to start teaching him about mythological flowers next. Just then, Natsu interrupts their conversation. Natsugu says that he heard Jinya is someone who deals with rumors of demons and other weird phenomena. Jinya confirms that's true, and Natsugu asks if he could possibly help him solve a mystery. But Jinya refuses, saying that his specialty is limited to demon slaying, and unless demons are involved, he's not going to be much help. Natsugu seems to understand but leaves looking pretty disappointed. After he's gone, the owner asks Jinya if he could reconsider and lend Natsugu a hand. He explains that Natsugu is looking for his missing big brother, and he's been worried sick about it. Bofu chimes in too, urging Jinya to help. And after a moment, Jinya agrees since he does owe them both a favor. He's still curious though why they care so much, and the owner just laughs and says it's because Natsugu is one of their rare regulars. The scene then shifts to Jinya running into Natsu at a little tea stall, and she's surprised to bump into him there. She orders some tea and a machi while he sits down nearby. While waiting for her food, she asks him if he likes machi, and he says he does. Her order soon arrives, and while she's eating, Jinya casually asks her when she and Zenji are finally getting married. Natsu almost chokes on her food, stunned by the question, and demands to know where that came from. Jinya reminds her that she's 16 now, and that's usually considered marrying age. She admits that's true, but she immediately adds that she could never marry Zenji, since he's always been more like a brother to her. She explains that while her father might have some prospective husbands lined up already, he also told her she's free to choose her own path. From a practical standpoint, she figures her father would probably prefer if she married someone like a samurai or a merchant for business reasons. Curious, she then flips the question back at Jinya, asking him what he thinks about marriage. He shrugs and says that nobody would ever want to marry a weird ronin like him, who doesn't even have a stable job. Natsu agrees with a laugh, but she also says that eventually everyone has to settle down at some point. She then asks him how old he is anyway. When he answers that he's 31, she's genuinely surprised to find out he's older than Zenji. She then leans in a little closer, studying him with curiosity, and points out that he doesn't really look that old, asking if he has some secret to staying young. Jinya simply says he has no idea, brushing it off. He then stands up, saying that he has work to get back to. Natsu wonders if it's another demon hunt, and he confirms it is. She questions why he's so fixated on hunting demons, when with his sword skills he could easily land a much more stable job. But Jinya doesn't have a real answer for her. He admits that even he isn't sure why. Still, if he had to give her a reason, he says it's simply the only path he knows how to walk. Natsu smiles, telling him that he usually comes across as so dry and detached that she sometimes wonders if he even cares about anything. But hearing him open up even just a little shows her that deep down he's just a regular guy with worries like anyone else. She laughs and tells him to stop speaking to her so formally from now on. With that, she bids him goodbye, playfully warning him not to brood too much or else he's going to end up with permanent wrinkles on his forehead. The scene then shifts over to Natsugu's home, where he is getting ready to leave. His mom sees him off and immediately guesses that he's heading out to search for his brother again, and his silence says it all. She reminds him once more that he's the sole heir to the Miura family and insists he never had an older brother, but Natsugu firmly replies that he remembers his brother clearly. She knows he's been wandering the slums and red light districts, chasing after shadows. She begs him to give up the foolish search and start behaving like a proper samurai, one who serves his lord with dignity. But Natsugu remains stubborn and says that he'll fulfill his duties, but only after he finds his brother. With that, he excuses himself and walks away, even as she calls after him. As Natsugu dashes off through the streets, he recalls a conversation he once had with his brother. His brother said that it wasn't houses or land that made people, it was people who made homes. His brother also believed in loyalty and dedication, but refused to compromise his own beliefs for the sake of duty. That Natsugu wonders where his brother could be now. Just then, Jinya appears beside him, asking if he's heading out to continue the search, and Natsugu is caught off guard but relieved to see him. Jinya tells him that he's decided to take a closer look into his situation, although he warns that he can't guarantee they'll find any answers. Natsugu says that's perfectly fine, he's just glad someone believes him. Jinya then immediately gets to the point, asking Natsugu about the events leading up to his brother's disappearance, but they decide to take the conversation somewhere more private before going into the details. The scene then shifts to the two of them seated at the soba shop, and Natsugu can't help but take notice of the katana hanging at Jinya's side. It's clearly no ordinary blade, its craftsmanship is far too refined. Curious, Natsugu remarks on how odd it is for a Ronin to carry such a high-quality weapon and wonders aloud whether Jinya might have come from a samurai lineage. Jinya shakes his head, explaining that he didn't. He recounts how he once stayed in a remote mountain village known for its forged bellows, home to blacksmiths who specialized in crafting katanas. While there, he served in a role that required him to wield one, and now he serves a similar purpose once more. The blade he carries was authorized by the shogunate, so he has official permission to keep it at his side. Natsugu hazards a guess, asking if Jinya might be from Kadono. Jinya raises an eyebrow, impressed by the accuracy. Natsugu grins, explaining that he suspected it when he saw the design of the scabbard. He admits he's something of a katana enthusiast, and he's read that one hallmark of Kadona blades is their scabbards, unassuming in design but elegant in their subtle craftsmanship. Jinya confirms that this particular blade was once a sacred artifact enshrined in the village. It ended up in his hands due to circumstances he'd rather not get into. Natsugu leans in, intrigued, and asks for the blade's name. Jinya answers that it's called Yarai, and Natsugu lights up the mention of it, speculating that the name might derive from an old phrase tied to warding off evil or purifying spirits, and he asks Jinya if he knows any stories like that. Jinya admits he doesn't, but recalls the village elder once saying the sword had remained spotless for over 100 years. Natsugu is thrilled to hear it and, practically brimming with excitement, asks if Jinya would be willing to draw the sword and show it to him. Jinya politely declines, and Natsugu quickly backs off, apologizing for getting carried away. With that aside, Jinya says it's time they get to the heart of the matter. Natsugu then shares his story, how his older brother suddenly vanished without a trace, and no matter how far he searches, he finds nothing. What's worse is that nobody seems to remember his brother ever existing, not even their own parents. Everyone insists that Natsugu is the Miura family's sole heir. A few people admit the name Saganaga rings a faint bell, but even they eventually insist there must be a mistake. Natsugu has no choice but to accept that he's the only person who still recalls his brother's existence. The shop owner, overhearing the heavy subject, gently cuts in, suggesting that if they're going to discuss something so serious, they might want to move somewhere more private. But Jinya shakes his head and jokingly says that it's fine because this place doesn't get much traffic. But then he adds that it was because Ofu and her father both seemed genuinely worried about Natsugu, and that's why they came to talk here. Jinya then asks Natsugu when exactly his brother vanished, and Natsugu replies that it was near the end of January. He remembers that right before his disappearance, his brother mentioned going to meet a girl. Not long after, Natsugu found some flowers in his brother's room. He couldn't identify what kind they were, but they had a strong, lingering scent. The flowers were small, with delicate white petals and a bright yellow center, and it struck him as odd because his brother was never someone who cared for flowers. Since no one else had been in the room besides him, Natsugu figured his brother must have left them there himself. Jinya considers this and asks if he still has the flowers. Natsugu nods, saying that he kept them preserved, thinking they might serve as evidence if anything ever came to light. Hearing that, Jinya asks if he can visit Natsugu's house tomorrow to take a look himself. Natsugu hesitates for a moment, then agrees. The scene then shifts to Jinya arriving at the soba shop again the next day, and he notices that Natsu is already there. He places an order for soba, and the owner seems amused that Jinya has started calling Natsu so casually. He teases Ofu, saying she might need to step up her game, and she quickly tells her father to stop talking nonsense. Ofu comments that the two seem to be getting along, and Natsu casually replies that it's nothing special. Jinya then asks Ofu how well she knows Natsugu, and she says they aren't particularly close, but they talk now and then when he visits the shop. She's curious why Jinya's asking, and he simply replies that he was just wondering. Ofu says Natsugu has always been respectful in their conversations and comes across as a genuinely kind and sincere man. Natsu realizes they're talking about the samurai she bumped into the other day, and she agrees because she found him to be humble and polite too. The owner chimes in, saying Natsugu seems nice and all, but he becomes overly enthusiastic whenever swords are brought up. That reminds him, so he grabs something to show everyone, and it's a kogai. He explains that Natsugu's family serves as vassals to the shogun, so it's expected for them to possess tools like this. But Natsugu once gave him this particular kogai, which is traditionally carried by samurai. The owner adds that Natsugu is completely obsessed with swords. It's practically the motivation behind everything he does. He even recalls overhearing Natsugu's mother scolding him for this obsession, and Jinya asks if he's had any dealings with her. The owner says no, he's only ever caught a glimpse of her, but based on what he's heard, she's quite the fearsome woman. The owner then tries to hand the kogai over to Jinya, who's reluctant to accept it at first since Natsugu gave it as a gift, but the owner insists he has no use for it, and eventually Jinya agrees to take it, deciding he'll hold on to it for now. He then turns to Ofu and asks if the flowers Natsugu mentioned the other night were daffodils, and she confirms they were. But Jinya finds that hard to believe since Natsugu described them as being small. Still, he really hopes they're anything but daffodils. We then cut to the same young girl from before, and she reflects quietly to herself that the place she's in now used to be her garden of joy, where she spent her childhood, but now she knows she can never return there. The scene then shifts to Jinya arriving at Natsugu's home, where his mother quickly takes notice. She eyes the unfamiliar guest and asks who he is, prompting Jinya to politely introduce himself. She returns the greeting with warmth and curiosity and turns to her son for clarification. Jinya explains that he's from Kodono, the village known for its legendary blacksmiths. Natsugu tells her that Jinya is a samurai he recently crossed paths with, someone who shares his deep love for swords. He invited him over to share a few drinks, and the two head inside together. Before they get far, Natsugu's mother thanks Jinya, which catches him off guard. He asks what for, and she tells him her son has been going through a rough patch lately. But today he seems lighter and happier, so seeing that as his mother makes her grateful, and that makes Jinya quietly touched by her words. Next, we find them seated in a quiet room, and Jinya notes how kind Natsugu's mother seems. Natsugu shrugs it off, calling her a bit much, then changes the subject by showing him the flowers left behind in his brother's room. Jinya leans closer to inspect them and confirms that they're definitely daffodils. Natsugu asks if there's anything special about them, and Jinya replies that they're not particularly rare, but they're smaller than normal. He then asks Natsugu if he's absolutely sure he found these blooming during spring. Natsugu nods without hesitation, and Jinya's expression darkens. He tells him the girl that Sadanaga met might not have been human. Sadanaga could have been pulled into another dimension, and these flowers are proof of that. Natsugu realizes that these flowers could be from the demon's domain, and Jinya asks to see his brother's room firsthand. Natsugu agrees and turns to lead the way, but Jinya stays still, telling him to go ahead. Natsugu pauses, unsure how Jinya will follow, but Jinya simply replies that he'll manage, and with that Natsugu leaves. Alone now, Jinya thinks to himself that if the enemy can sense his presence, they might not appear at all. So he activates his stealth skill and fades from sight, trailing behind without a sound. As soon as Natsugu opens the door to the room, a faint scent of daffodils fills the air and he suddenly grows dizzy. Then the vision begins and he sees a young girl staring at a city engulfed in flames. She races to find her parents, but they're already trapped in the inferno, burning before her eyes, and all she can do is watch helplessly. After what feels like forever, the flames finally die down and the girl stirs, stunned that she's still alive. As she rises, she sees that half the town has been reduced to ash. She wanders aimlessly through the ruins, eyes blank, spirit broken. The people she passes look at her in horror and they scramble to get away. Confused, she catches a glimpse of her reflection and recoils because her face has turned into a demon. Then a realization hits her hard. Her parents are gone, her home destroyed, and every piece of her past ripped out from the roots. Worst of all, she no longer recognizes herself, so there's no way she can ever return to the peaceful life she once had. With no one to turn to, she masked her identity and faded from society, surviving in secret as the years crept by. Eventually, she found her way back to the ruins of her old home, only to see it rebuilt, now occupied by strangers, so something in her cracked. She longed more than anything to return to the life she lost, and that desperate longing awakened a strange power inside her, one that let her forge a new dimension, a dreamlike world where she could relive her memories again and again. Back in the present, Natsugu jolts awake inside that illusion, and Jinya informs him that they've stumbled into the dimensional echo tied to his brother's room. Natsugu looks around, confused by the strange world they're standing in, and Jinya asks if he saw the girl and her burning house just now. Natsugu says he did, right before spotting a familiar figure. It's his brother Sadanaga, laughing, smiling, playing with the girl from his vision. But something feels off because these aren't real events. They're frozen echoes, a memory looping on repeat. And then the scene shifts. Sadanaga now turns to the girl and asks what she'd like him to make today. She tells him he should stop coming back and just go home to his family. But instead he insists on making his favorite soba for her. She pleads with him to leave because she can't go on like this. This garden, this world, it's all she has. And it's the only place where she can still see her parents. But Sadanaga gently tells her she's wrong. Homes don't shape people, people shape homes. If a place only brings pain, then it was never a real home to begin with. She asks him how he could possibly know that, and he tells her she already understands. Deep down, after all, she's been stuck here for over a century. And he says he can leave this place, but only if she chooses to come with him. Tears in her eyes, she says it's not possible. This dream world is all she has left because it's the only space where she still feels like she belongs. So Sadanaga smiles and says that if it's how it is, then he'll stay right here with her. And gently tells her that if she wants, she can think of him as her father, and they could live together in peace. But she shakes her head and says that she could never see him that way. Sadanaga simply smiles and says that's okay, and he'll wait until the day she changes her mind. He's not joking about this. He tells her that if the day ever comes where she accepts him as family, then she has to promise they'll leave this place together. She's convinced that day will never come, and he figures that means he'll be stuck here with her for good. A moment later, Sadanaga fades from sight and Natsugu looks around frantically, asking the girl where his brother went, and she answers quietly that there's no one else here now. Natsugu pleads, wanting his brother back, but Jinya steps forward and says that's not possible anymore. Natsugu doesn't understand because Sadanami was just here with them. Jinya casually brings up that he's been here before, prompting Natsugu to ask what he means. Jinya explains that certain flowers only bloom in certain seasons, and the tiny daffodils Natsugu pointed out earlier are usually a winter bloom. But back when Sadanaga vanished, he saw those exact same flowers blooming in the middle of spring, the same season Sadanaga vanished. He explains that this dimension exists beyond the bounds of their own world, and while he once suspected that daffodils were always blooming in this place, it's actually winter daphnes blooming now. His flowers signal the start of spring, but in their world, it's currently autumn. That's when he points out that time flows faster in this realm. The girl then reveals that she holds the power of the dreamer. It lets her recreate a garden filled with fragments of joy from her past, a small, self-contained world that replays her memories. But that's all it can do. Her ability is nothing more than a stroll down memory lane, and right now she's alone in it. Natsugu refuses to accept that, and he clings to hope, but she apologizes to him for taking Sadanaga away. She says her own brother Hyoma once saved her, and now it's time to repay that gift. She turns to leave, explaining that once she's gone, they'll return to where they came from. Jinya asks where she'll go now, and she says she's done wasting her life trapped in old memories. Hyoma gave her something real, a world built just for her, and now she'll finally go there. Jinya realizes she's honoring the promise she made to Sadanaga. Moments later, both he and Natsugu awaken in the real world. Natsugu still doesn't understand why his brother stayed behind, and Jinya says nothing. He just stands there, staring into the horizon. The scene then shifts to Natsugu and Jinya sitting together in the soba shop. Natsugu shares that he did a little digging and found out that the Great Fire of Maireki happened over 2 centuries ago. It must have been the same fire that destroyed everything the girl held dear. According to his research, the land his house stands on now was likely where the girl's home once was. That clicks with Jinya, who realizes it's why the miniature world she recreated ended up being linked to his home. He quietly apologizes, feeling like he didn't do much to help. But Natsugu says it's alright. He's just relieved to know the kind of man his brother really was, someone who stood by his beliefs no matter what. He doesn't fully understand why Sadanaga chose to walk away from his own family, but at least now he knows his brother stayed true to his heart until the very end. He stands to leave, mentioning that he's running late. But before he heads out, Ofu gently tells him that his brother was a wonderful man. And even if the world forgets his name, it doesn't erase the fact that he risked everything to save a girl who had no one else. Natsugu tears up hearing that and walks away quietly. Once he's gone, Ofu turns to Jinya and thanks him for helping Natsugu get closure. But Jinya isn't at ease because there are still some details that don't sit right with him. He brings up how the demon girl kept calling Sadanaga Hyoma, but he's never heard that name before. The shop owner suggests that might have been Sadanaga's true name, and Jinya notes that usually only a samurai's lord would know such a thing. The shopkeeper explains that it's not entirely unheard of for family members to know, but the fact that the girl referred to him as Hyoma likely means he saw her as family. That sparks another memory for Jinya, a time he mentioned how Natsugu was always getting scolded by his mother for being obsessed with swords. He realizes now that back then, he'd accidentally used Natsugu's real name Aramori. The owner casually says he must have heard it from his mother once, but Jinya isn't buying it because that woman was way too proper to just let something like that slip. Even when speaking to a lowly ronin like him, she showed respect and chose her words carefully. She always referred to her son as Natsugu in front of others, so where exactly did the owner really hear the name Aramori? Because only a person's lord or family should know that. And something else is off. The demon girl never said Sadanaga had died, just that he wasn't here anymore. That thought leads Jinya to a new theory. Sadanaga might still be alive. He could have lived with the girl for nearly 2 decades before deciding to move on. But by then, he'd aged too much to return to his old life. So instead, he slipped into the city, found a cheap old house, and quietly started over, running his own soba shop. Jinya asks if he's incorrect, but the shop owner still won't budge. He insists that Sadanaga may have simply passed away from old age while still trapped in the other dimension. But Jinya isn't convinced. He recalls the girl's expression, and it wasn't the look of someone who had lost someone. She was smiling, and that smile told him she found a new father. Once again, Jinya calls him out, stating plainly that the shopkeeper is Sadanaga. After a moment, the owner quietly admits that Jinya is right. He wonders how long Jinya's known, and Jinya replies that he figured it out the moment everything came together. There had been hints scattered throughout, and one of the biggest was the kogai he carried. Jinya always thought it odd for a simple soba shop owner to have something like that. The owner smiles and explains it was actually a gift from Natsugu, who got annoyed watching him scratch his itchy scalp in public and wanted him to look more proper. Jinya asks why he doesn't just tell Natsugu the truth, that he's alive. Surely it would make him happy. But the owner says he's already made his choice, and he chose the girl. And after that, he could no longer consider himself a part of the Miura family. He gave up the right to call himself Natsugu's brother. Besides, Natsu, who's grown now, he can stand on his own. He offers Jinya the Kogai as a gift and asks if he understands why he chose to become that little girl's father. Jinya simply says there was no grand reason, and the owner agrees. He says it was just that simple. He couldn't stand watching the girl suffer alone. So he stayed, and that was it. A man makes his choices and sticks with them. Trying to explain it further wouldn't change how others see it. Everyone has their own way of thinking. Jinya nods, understanding perfectly. The owner knew he would. After all, Jinya's lived long enough to gain some wisdom, and he also knows that Jinya is a demon. It catches Jinya off guard, but the owner explains that after living alongside a demon for more than 20 years, you start to recognize the signs. Curious, Jinya asks how the girl is doing these days. The owner looks over and says she's right here. At that moment, Ofu reveals her demon eyes and Jinya realizes it. She's the little girl from the other world. That's why he was able to enter her memory realm so easily, because it was connected to her. Ofu beats his eyes and asks if he's going to kill her now that he knows she's a demon. But Jinya just sighs, brushes past it, and calmly orders a bowl of soba. She lights up with a quiet smile, glad to see that there's more to him than duty alone, and then she walks over to serve him his meal. It's still 1853, and we find Jinya sitting down for tea and snacks with his father. His father says he has a favor to ask. He explains that the owner of a picture book shop in Tenmako came to him recently, saying he got his hands on something unusual. He then shows Jinya a print of a demon called the Ukiyo-e of Koganzaka. Jinya asks if there are any strange stories tied to the artwork, and his father explains that the artist who made the piece fell seriously ill and hasn't recovered. Some people are saying the illness hit him because he sold a drawing of a demon. Then he asked Jinya for his thoughts. At first glance, Jinya says it looks normal, but he adds that things tied to the supernatural usually only reveal themselves under specific circumstances. His father agrees and says that if the print turns out to cause harm, he hopes Jinya will handle it. Jinya nods, and his father reassures him that he's not asking for a free favor. He says once it's all taken care of, they should grab a drink together, and Jinya is fine with that. The next day, we see Jinya stopping by the soba shop and ordering a bowl. Zenji walks in and pulls out a version of the Ukiyo-e of Koganzaka, telling him that it's supposed to be a cursed print. He says the previous owner died under mysterious circumstances, supposedly because of some kind of hex. Jinya immediately notices that the print is torn, and Zenji admits he accidentally ripped it on the way over. The owner scolds him for dragging a cursed, ripped print into his shop. Zenji apologizes, and Jinya pulls out his own copy of the picture and says it came from a picture book dealer in Tenmako. But when they compare both versions, Zenji sees they're exactly the same. Jinya doesn't like the idea that more than one cursed print with no clear origin is floating around. Ofu then looks over the print and says it looks like nothing more than a beautiful artwork at first glance, and she asks Zenji if he notices anything strange about it. He points out that there's no fading or damage, and the colors still look fresh, probably printed within the last year. Zenji then says he knows the shop in Tenmako and could easily find out who the artist is, so Jinya says that he'd appreciate the help, but Zenji says not to mention it after all. He's done a lot for Natsu. Later, Zenji heads off alone to speak with the picture bookseller, while Jinya waits nearby, hidden in the shadows. The shopkeeper greets him, joking if he's here to browse the newest selection of erotic prints, but Zenji brushes it off and says they can talk about that another time. Right now, he wants to ask about the Ukiyo-e of Koganzaka. The shopkeeper admits that he's no longer displaying that one because it's been labeled a demon picture, and he's not willing to take that kind of risk. Zenji assumes it's just a rumor the artist started, but the owner says the artist actually fell sick and hasn't recovered, and there's even talk that someone who bought the picture died under mysterious circumstances. He doesn't want to damage his shop's reputation, so he's keeping it tucked away. Zenji finds the whole thing suspicious and wonders whether the artist lives nearby. Soon after Zenji returns, and Jinya immediately notices the print in his hand. Zenji quickly hides it and tells him he found out the artist lives in Sakaikyo. Jinya nods and heads off, and we cut to him arriving at the artist's residence. After asking for permission, he enters, and the artist, Sabadashu, welcomes him, saying he hasn't had a visitor in quite some time. Saga asks who he is, and Jinya introduces himself politely. He explains that he came to speak with him about a particular matter, but Saga tells him to relax because he's not anyone of importance. Jinya takes his seat and notices the room is scattered with paintings. He mentions he's heard that Saga has been bedridden, but Saga gently corrects him, saying it's not sickness, it's just that he's no longer as resilient as he once was. His body can't handle painting the way it used to, and Jinya realizes that the demon painting isn't responsible for his condition. Saga asks if Sanjendov sent him, but Jinya says no, he just came to inquire about the demon print he created. Saga is clearly flooded with memories at the mention of the picture, so Jinya explains that he's investigating its origin and wants to know the truth behind it. Saga understands and starts by explaining the name. He says Kuganzaka doesn't refer to a road in Edo, but to the woman depicted in the artwork. Jinyo wonders if that's the woman's name, but Saga says it's not exactly that. Long ago, a man wielding a Kodono-style blade gave the piece that name. The man's name was Motoharu, and he often visited this place. At that, Jinyo realizes he's talking about his foster father, and he recalls his final moments with him. During his final moments, he felt powerless, unable to even protect the one woman he truly cared for, and felt useless. He admitted to Jinya that at first, he wasn't fond of yokais. Still, being chosen as the guardian of a shrine maiden wasn't the worst fate. Even though he could never quite understand her, little by little, he found himself wanting to shield the very person who once made his life harder. He believed he could do it, but everything eventually changes. He looked Jinya in the eye and told him not to end up like him, not to become a man who lets bitterness define who he is. And then, without hesitation, he walked into battle and never came back. Now in the present, Jinya asks Saga to tell him more about Motoharu, revealing that Motoharu had raised him as his foster father. Saga agrees, saying there's no way to discuss the origin of the Kuganzaka artwork without bringing up Motoharu. He begins his story saying it all began when he was still just a beginner artist, struggling to find his place. He had managed to rent a small place in Edo, and during his time there, he caught sight of a woman around the neighborhood. Curious, he asked her name, and she replied that she couldn't tell him, not because she was hiding something, but because she physically couldn't lie, so she simply asked him to refer to her as Nameless. Over time, they got to know each other better, and she would sometimes stop by to look at his work. He once told her that he was going to become Edo's most renowned artist, and she laughed, thinking he was just messing around. Then one day, Motoharu arrived to deliver a message from the Itsukyan. He complained the whole time about how ridiculous it was for a guardian like him to be sent out running errands. Saga teased him, asking why he always had something negative to say about the Shrine Maiden. Motoharu explained that he took the role believing it was something honorable, but instead she had him running letters like a delivery boy. He even joked that she was worse than any demon he never heard of. According to Saga, Motoharu would visit Edo every year, and without fail, he'd be full of complaints about the Itsukyan. This catches Jinya off guard because apparently Motoharu had only ever shown him his serious noble side. Saga continues and shifts back to the picture itself, explaining that he made the artwork back when Nameless was still living nearby. Later on, Senjendo came along and wanted to publish it, so Saga redrew a master copy for woodblock reproduction, and that's how the printed version started circulating. Jinya wonders aloud if the image was based on Nameless herself, but Saga tells him it's not quite that simple. Then Jinya asks the real question why he called Kuganzaka a demon picture, so Saga quietly replies that it's because it is one, the painting is real, and it carries an actual curse. But before Saga begins telling the full story, he turns to Jinya and asks what thoughts crossed his mind when he first laid eyes on the artwork. Jinya replies that it reminded him of the legend of Princess Nunakawa from Shinano, but the sword in her hand made him suspect it might be linked to Kodono and the Itsukyan. Saga nods, saying that's a sharp observation, then warns that the truth behind the painting might be something Jinya will wish he hadn't heard. He begins explaining, telling him that Motoharu had come to Edo year after year on business, often stopping by to vent and then heading home. But at some point, his attitude toward the Shrine Maiden started to shift, and one day, out of nowhere, he asked Saga to draw a portrait of her. Saga teased him about it, but Motoharu admitted that he no longer resented her because he had come to understand that she had her reasons for the things she did. Saga agreed to take on the request, but there was one problem. He had never actually seen the Itsukyan in person. Motoharu brushed it off and said it wouldn't be an issue because Nameless could serve as the model. He told Saga that Nameless originally came from Shinano, but something tragic happened to her there, and afterward, she ended up living in Kodono, and eventually she made her way to Edo. Saga found the story interesting, but wasn't sure how any of that would help him draw the Shrine Maiden. So Motoharu told him that Nameless and yokais were far more alike than anyone realized, and visually, they were practically indistinguishable. Jinya realizes then that the figure in the Kuganzaka painting must be modeled after yokais. Saga confirms that he's right, saying that the final portrait was drawn based on Nameless with Motoharu's input guiding the finer details. When Jinya asks about the whole demon picture story, Saga explains that it was all a running joke. Motoharu used to say the Itsukyan was more demonic than any real monster, so Saga dubbed the portrait a demon picture as a jab at those complaints. It was meant as a joke between them, but years later, when he redrew the image for Senjendo out of nostalgia, he made the same joke again, and they took it seriously. They thought it really was cursed, especially after someone who bought it fell ill. A string of coincidences blew the whole thing out of proportion, and suddenly, people were calling it a cursed image. Jinya then asks what Saga meant earlier when he said he might regret learning the truth, and Saga responds by asking if Jinya sees Kuganzaka as a beautiful piece. He explains that no matter how many times he revised the picture, Motoharu was never satisfied. He kept pushing for more elegance, more grace, always wanting it to reflect a kind of beauty that went beyond reality. Saga reveals that Kuganzaka is really the Itsukin through Motoharu's lens. It's her form, her presence taken and polished to divine levels of beauty. He tells Jinya that while today the image might remind him of Princess Nonakawa, back then, Motoharu compared it to Yasakato no Kami, the sacred deity. And Jinya recalls Motoharu teaching him a bit about that deity when he was young, and she was a revered figure from Suwa and Shinano. Saga guesses Motoharu might have said those things because Nameless came from Shinano, but both he and his father compared the painting to the divine women of Shinano, and Saga reveals that Motoharu gave it the name Kudanzaka because he believed it was even more breathtaking than Yasakato no Kami herself. He explains that the painting is essentially a reflection of Motoharu's intense love, something so heavy and passionate it felt like a curse. Jinya realizes that Kuganzaka wasn't born from hatred or anger, but from a feeling far deeper than that. Saga's a bit surprised that Jinya had no idea about the truth behind the painting, and he decides to give him one of the older illustrations he sketched back when it all started. He hopes that Jinya won't think less of his father after everything he said, because while Motoharu might have been a stubborn man, he truly did care about his family. Once his daughter was born, he started visiting Ito less and less, and after he told Saga that he'd become a foster father to 2 kids, he stopped coming altogether. That's just the kind of man he was, and Jinya already knows it. Later, Jinya is sitting in the soba shop quietly eating a bowl, and he tells the owner that he really was a good dad. Ofu asks if something's bothering him and wonders if it's got anything to do with the Kuganzaka painting. Jinya tells her it's nothing like that, he just happened to learn something new about the man who raised him. Ofu tells him that sounds normal because nobody's perfect. Her own dad's got flaws too, but she loves him all the more because of them, and Jinya agrees with her. Jinya then meets up with his real father later and lets him know that the painting isn't dangerous and the demon part was really just the artist's own regrets bleeding into the canvas, so Jinya doesn't see any harm in keeping it or selling it off. His father then brings up the person who supposedly died because of it, but Jinya says that was probably just a freak coincidence. He also mentions that he took possession of the print that person had on them and it didn't seem cursed at all. His father nods, thanks him for the work, and tells him he'll hand over the payment once he's ready to head out, but for now, they should just sit and have a drink. They start drinking together, and Jinya asks if his dad always drinks like this. His father says he used to drink as a way to avoid dealing with real life, and over time, it simply turned into a habit. Then he turns the question back to Jinya. Jinya says he enjoys drinking, especially under the moonlight, every now and then. His father says they should drink together again sometime if the chance comes up, and Jinya agrees. The story then continues into the year 1854, and we observe a sinister-looking woman approaching Jinya. She was once a woman from the Pleasure District, and she begs him to keep her company for the night. He declines, but she pleads again, claiming she is suffering, but he still refuses. Suddenly, she completely shifts into a full demon form and lunges at him, but he evades her attack and continues avoiding her follow-up strikes. He asks for her identity, but she is beyond responding, and he ultimately kills her as she lunges forward once more. His client who requested his services then appears on the scene, convinced that his renown as a demon slayer is genuine. She hands over his reward, explaining that the woman he eliminated was once a former courtesan from Yashiwara who had been imprisoned in a brothel and forced to work there. She was afflicted with a deadly sickness and was abandoned after being physically and emotionally destroyed, eventually transforming into a monster and beginning to murder men beneath the cherry trees. The client considers her fate incredibly tragic, prompting him to question whether pity motivated her to employ his services. The client replies she engaged him only because she herself is similar to that woman, and she may easily suffer the same fate someday. Knowing this, she couldn't simply ignore her, and she thanks him and says sorry for dumping something like this on him. Jinya questions why she would consider this burdensome, and she responds it's her profession to interpret a man's feelings from his expression, and he currently has the look of a confused little boy. He asks exactly who she is, and she replies that he should just call her Harlot, because that's precisely what she is. She hopes he'll eliminate her should she ever transform into a twisted spirit from the red light district as well, though she acknowledges she won't have money to offer him. He informs her that he never works without payment, prompting her to remark on his coldness as she walks away. The scene then shifts to Ofu and Natsu attending a festival by themselves, and Natsu is irritated that none of the boys they invited decided to show up. Ofu understands Jinya and Natsugu were occupied, but feels disappointed that Zenji didn't show either, especially since he initiated the invitation. Natsu reveals Zenji genuinely wanted to attend, but her father intervened, reminding him that holidays are prime opportunities for merchants to profit. Natsu then suggests they simply enjoy the festival by themselves, and Ofu happily agrees. They then stroll through the stalls, grab some snacks, and stop by a lantern plant vendor. Natsu questions why they're known as lantern plants, and Ofu tells her it's partly due to their vivid color, but others suggest it's because they resemble tiny flames. There are several theories, but nobody knows for sure how the name originated, and Ofu mentions their name can also be written using the kanji for demon and light. Because they're shaped like lanterns, some theorize that demons ignite them to see at night, and Natsu asks her to stop before she ruins their charm completely. Ofu inquires if Natsu dislikes demons, and Natsu confirms she does, noting it's hard to find anyone who doesn't. She reveals she has been attacked twice by demons already and would have died if Jinya hadn't intervened. Natsu explains she first encountered Jinya 4 years ago, when he served as her bodyguard for just 2 nights. When she saw him slice a demon's arm off, she had the naive idea that he was a legendary swordsman straight out of a fairy tale, and Ofu comments that Natsu clearly has strong feelings for Jinya. Natsu insists that's not what she meant, clarifying she simply sees him as a figure from a children's story. However, she recalls the moment when Jinya admitted even he doesn't know why he hunts demons, noting it made him seem less like a master swordsman and more like another fragile person. She recognized he wasn't so different from herself, which put her at ease. Natsu adds it's unfair to call these romantic feelings, since that would be disrespectful to women everywhere, and Ofu agrees, mentioning she's also noticed Jinya's bad habit of ignoring his true emotions. At that moment, a man named Akitsu calls out to them from his stand, and Ofu recognizes him, prompting Natsu to ask who he is. Ofu explains he's been a regular customer at her shop since last year, always ordering deliveries. He's originally from Kyoto, and the man introduces himself as Somgoro Akitsu. Natsu is skeptical that he really is Somgoro Akitsu, one of the most renowned metalsmiths of their era. He urges her not to fixate on the name, but Natsu can't simply ignore it, emphasizing that as a merchant's daughter, names carry significant weight. She asks whether the goods he's selling truly live up to the Somgoro reputation and carefully examines his wares, conceding their decent quality. Akitsu jokes about her tough standards and then proudly presents her with some intricately painted clam shells. Natsu observes that they're a bit old but still beautifully crafted, and he suggests that a young lady her age probably has some boy she's interested in. So if she were to give him a gift like this, he's bound to fall for her. Natsu insists she isn't interested in anyone that way, but Ofu interjects, saying she's just being bashful and does like someone, though she can't admit it openly. Natsu tells her to stop talking immediately, so the vendor instead offers her a net suit carved as a fluffy sparrow. He reveals he crafted this himself, and she recognizes it's not exactly Somagoro level, but still decent quality. He tells her it would suit someone her age perfectly, explaining that in China, there's a legend that sparrows become clams when they dive into the ocean. That's their explanation for why sparrows disappear in late autumn, and Natsu asks how that relates to her. He explains he thought his sparrow fit her better since she's not mature enough for the clamshells yet, causing Ofu to laugh at the joke. Natsu gets irritated by this, but he clarifies he's not making fun of her and hopes her youthful feelings can mature into a clam someday. Natsu retorts that this entire conversation is nonsense, yet she decides to buy the netsuke anyway since it's rather adorable. As she pays, he hands her a genuine Somagoro hairpin as a bonus, prompting her to ask where he acquired it. He casually says he got it cheaply somewhere. If she doesn't want it, he'll just toss it away. She quickly accepts the gift, and he asks Ofu if she'd like anything, but Ofu declines. He jokes about how tightly she's holding onto her money, and the two of them then move along. Later that night, Jinya is out hunting another demon in a warehouse, and he eventually locates it, noticing it's merely a child. He asks for its name, and when it replies that it's Kikuo, he promptly slays it. Shortly afterward, he meets the warehouse owner, who thanks him for his service and gives him his payment. He offers Jinya some sake from his stock as a token of gratitude, but Jinya politely declines. As Jinya leaves, the owner remarks he'll definitely seek his help again if another incident arises, while a shady grin spreads across his face. Later on, Jinya runs into Harla again, and she's relieved to see he made it out in one piece. She's pleased her intel was accurate this time, and he hands her a cut of his payment in thanks. She picks up on the heavy mood he's carrying and asks what's got him looking so grim. So Jinya explains that he ended up taking out someone he really didn't want to. But she reminds him that it's not like he planned on sparing the demon either, and as she turns to leave, she suddenly recalls something. There's been talk about another guy who's been hunting demons, but she's not talking about Jinya. Apparently, this guy's a spirit medium of some kind and can command Shinigami to exorcise demons for him. She's not sure if it's real or just another crazy rumor, but she says if it is true, Jinya better watch out or this new guy might start snatching all the good-paying jobs, and with that, she heads off. The following day, Jinya stops by the soba shop, and the owner and Ofu are happy to see him. Ofu quickly tells him that Natsu's been acting strange since yesterday. The moment she spots Jinya, Natsu rushes over, clings to him, and happily calls him her brother, saying how much she missed him. She insists she's glad to be back by his side, and Jinya is clearly caught off guard, trying to gently pull his hand free, but Natsu only tightens her grip, saying she wants to stay close. Ofu then explains that this started when Natsu tried on the hairpin she bought yesterday, and right after putting it on, she suddenly went quiet and then began sobbing about her brother. Jinya notices that the pin she's wearing is a kanzashi and calmly asks Natsu if he can take a closer look. She hands it over without question, and he examines it with Ofu and a shop owner. It looks completely ordinary and nothing out of place. The owner then suggests that maybe smashing it would snap her out of it, but Jinya warns against doing anything reckless for now. He hands the pin back to Natsu, who immediately pulls him into a hub again. Just then, Natsugo and Zenji walk into the shop and freeze at the sight of Natsu wrapped around Jinya. Zenji's eyes go wide as he asks what the hell's going on, and when he tries to pull them apart, he finds he can't budge Natsu at all. She glances at him and casually asks who he is, leaving Zenji stunned and speechless. After that, they all sit down together and break the situation down for Zenji and Natsugu. Jinya turns to Ofu and asks where they got the kanzashi from, and she tells him they picked it up during the Hozuki festival a few nights ago. It was being sold by a man named Akitsu Somgoro, who claimed to be from Kyoto. Jinya decides to begin by tracking him down, but Zenji drops a bomb saying Somgoro has been dead for quite a while. He explains that the original Somgoro was a master metalsmith whose work dates back decades. His pieces are still famous to this day, and even their shop struggles to get their hands on one. Ofu recalls that Natsu did say this kanzashi was a genuine Somogoro piece where she first saw it. Zenji wonders if this could mean Somgoro's spirit came back and possessed Natsu somehow, but the shop owner shuts that down, saying he's actually met the man recently, and he was very much human. Jinya trusts the owner's read on the situation, but Ofu points out that this leaves them with barely anything to go on. Jinya figures he'll just have to find the guy directly and tries to leave, but Natsu is still clinging to him tightly. He gently asks her to let go, but she refuses and says she's finally found him again and doesn't want to be apart from him anymore. Jinya tries to make sense of it and asks why she keeps calling him her brother. She softly replies that birds don't need a reason to settle near a flower, and she simply wants to stay by his side. Her only wish was to be near him again, and now that's come true, she doesn't want it to end. Jinya speaks to her calmly, telling her he has something to do and asks her to hold down the place until he gets back. She wants to follow him, but he pats her on the head and promises that he'll return soon. That's enough for her, so she agrees to wait, and he heads out. The others are kind of stunned by how easily he handled that, and they start wondering if maybe he's dealt with this kind of thing before. The scene then shifts to Jinya going around town, asking people about Akitsu Somgoro, but he doesn't come up with anything useful. That evening, while wandering through the streets, a thought of Suzu crosses his mind. Just then, a voice calls out from behind. Akitsu steps up to him, and Jinya immediately asks if he needs something. But Akitsu says it's the other way around. Jinya's the one who's been trying to find him. He figures he already knows why, since demons only show up at his door for one reason. Jinya is caught off guard by how casually he points that out, especially because he's somehow aware that Jinya is a demon. That's when Jinya realizes this is the man Harlette mentioned before. Jinya asks for a proper introduction, and the man responds by summoning a group of familiars and calmly introducing himself as Akitsu Somgoro III.